Hi everyone, hope you all are doing great. In the previous episode 2, we have discussed about the Sicilian Dragon variation part 2. And in today's episode, which is part 3 of the Sicilian Dragon variation, which is the game number 38 of the book Winning Quickly with Black. We have discussed in the previous episodes like how the white gets an advantage in terms of deciding the attack when it's especially with the e4 lines, how black need to be very careful in terms of choosing the lines strategically, especially when it comes to the Sicilian defense. Hope these insights and the inputs which are provided in the video are helping you to some extent in your chess journey. If you feel so, please do like, share, comment and subscribe to the channel so that way it keeps me motivating to come up with such kind of chess informative videos. As part of today's episode, we're gonna discuss the last variation on the Sicilian Dragon variation, which is the game 38 of the book named Winning Quickly with Black. This is a game 38 played between Wolf and Eisinger in Karlsburg in 1958. Without further delay, we'll move on with the game analysis. White plays e4, black responds with c5, followed by knight f3, and black immediately goes with g6, followed by white pushing the pawn to d4, c cross d4, knight cross d4. After the early pawn movement of g7 to g6, white here can also play queen cross d4 instead of knight cross d4. But however, white continues with knight cross d4, and black continues with the plan of placing its bishop on the crucial long diagonal, which is g7. White attacks by developing the other knight to c3. Black also develops the knight to c6. White develops the bishop to e3. Black develops his knight to f6. White develops the bishop to e2 square, making himself ready to get shortly castle, and in the meanwhile black castles short castle. As in the previous game, black delays d7 to g6, hoping to play d7 to d5 in one go whenever it is feasible. However, currently at the moment d5 is premature in view of bishop to b5, followed by bishop to d7, e cross d5, followed by knight to b4. Then, as part of the 10th move in that variation, bishop will be placed to c4 and rook comes to c8, followed by bishop to b3, queen to a5, then queen to d2. So as part of the 8th move, if white plays bishop to b5, I'll have to take a move back. It's actually when white plays to e2, black, instead of doing a short castle, if he promotes the d7 to d5, then white responds pinning the knight by placing its bishop to b5, then followed by bishop d7, then e cross d5, followed by knight to b4. Then the bishop, as it is attacked, goes back to c4, then followed by rook to c8. Always in the Sicilian lines, rook will be pretty much effective on the c8 file, as it is semi-open file, which is in this scenario attacking the bishop which is not defended by any of its pieces. As the bishop is attacked, it moves back to its square, which is b3, then followed by the queen coming and sitting on a5 square. Now white places its queen on d2 square and making a possible move to whether to castle on long side or on the short side. So which is almost like equal if you notice the engine as well. So there is no much advantage for black in this variation if the pawn has been promoted from d7 to d5. That's the reason why we are getting back to the variation instead of d5 where black chooses to castle, then followed by queen d2 by white, and then the game continues with d5. So before queen to d2, white might also radically move back its knight to b3 after the black short castles on the king's. So this knight b3 radically prevents the d7 d5. However, after white short castles, white need not fear this move, as after the short castle, black goes ahead with the d5 pawn post e cross d5 and knight to b4. So after knight moves back to b3, black continues with d7 to d5, post which white does the short castle, after the ex d4. So this position is not giving or yielding any benefit to black, thus black will not choose this line. So if you notice, the engine is also showing somewhere white is having a benefit advantage, thus black choosing this line might not be beneficial for the black. In the other variation, after the black does the short castle, once white also decides to do the short castle, then if black chooses to proceed with d5, then white captures the pawn with e pawn, which is on d5. So knight is under threat, knight jumps onto square b4. If knight takes d5, then knight takes d5, and then knight takes d4, followed by white taking the knight on d4 with the bishop, which allows the black queen to capture the knight on d5 square. Then white captures the bishop on long diagonal, which is on g7 square, then followed by queen cross queen on d1 square, which leads to rook f cross d1, capturing the queen, and king captures the bishop on g7, then followed by bishop to f3, which is restricting the black bishop, which is on c8, to move, which is leading to capturing of the pawn on b7. With this variation, again black faces some difficulties. Now going back to the main line, where after black chooses to short castle and white moves the queen to d2, then black responds with d5 after e cross d5. Now getting back to the main line, after black plays d5, there might be a possibility that ex d5 is no doubt the main line, but however white can also go ahead with knight cross c6, followed by b pawn capturing the knight on c6, and then white pushing the pawn on e4 to e5 and giving a threat to the knight on f6, where black knight can be placed on knight to g4. The white bishop captures the g4 knight, and black bishop captures the bishop on g4. After that, white goes ahead with f4 and black goes ahead with f6. With this, black has excellent counterplay. Though the position as per the engine says 0, 0, 0, which is equal, but however black has an excellent counterplay. Now going back to move 8, after d5, instead of knight cross c6, e cross d6, e cross d5, followed by knight cross d5, and knight cross d5. Here after knight cross d5, black can also capture the knight which is on c6 as well. Let's look at that variation now. After knight cross c6, b cross c6, and rook to d1 from white, followed by black placing its bishop on e6. Then white builds the pressure on knight which is on d5 by placing its bishop on c4. As this is a blunder, we'll take that back the move where after the bishop d3, white goes with bishop to d4, blocking the bishop advantage, which will retrieve from the bishop long diagonal effectiveness as part of the Sicilian Dragon variation, where bishop captures the d4 bishop and queen captures the bishop which is on d4. Then followed by black queen getting placed on a5 square, pinning the knight. And with the help of the knight support, queen goes for an offer of queen exchange, for which black sticks to the square on b6. So the queen always, whenever gets back to the square b6, it has a threat on b2 square pawn. Thus, white will go ahead and then protects that pawn by placing its queen onto the a3 square. Now black builds the pressure by placing its f rook onto b8, so that the pressure is doubled on b2 pawn. So after this rook f2 b8, that move will create some positional favorability to the black as per the Barkowski and Adorjan game which happened in Budapest 1978. Now getting back to the main line of after the ninth move, which is knight takes d5, instead of knight cross c6, now let's watch how the game gonna proceed with the main line, which is knight cross d5. Knight cross d5 followed by knight cross d4. White protects its knight which is on d5 by placing its bishop on c4 square, which is a main line. However, before we proceed ahead with bishop c4, we can also have a look at one more variation, which is what if white bishop, which is dark square bishop, capturing the knight which is on d4. That leads to queen cross d5, whereas white is obliged to sacrifice a pawn, as the bishop will get captured on g7 by the white dark square bishop. And before the king captures the bishop, queen captures the pawn on g2 and threats the rook which is there on h1. And white decides to go ahead with the long castle so that it protects the rook which is on h1. If white wanted to be fancy and bold, instead of doing the long castle and preserving the rook, white might also try for d4 variation, which fails to e5. As queen to d4 fails to e5, let's look at the other variation, which is after queen captured g2, where white castles the long castle. Then king captures the g7 bishop. After king captures the g7 bishop, white queen moves to e3 square, but the black queen gets placed with a very good position advantage by placing its queen on c6 square, by giving a sacrifice of pawn on e7 square. However, white develops its bishop to d3 with an idea to double the rook on the e file. Now black develops its bishop to e6 square, which blocks the entire e file. Then white goes with the pawn movement onto the king side, where the black's king has been short castled by pushing the h4 pawn. And black stops the h4 by pushing its pawn to h5. Rook h to g1 played by white. Bishop g4 further cuts the g file and gives a threat for the rook which is there on d1 file. And this move suppresses the white's initiative and it does not gain any compensation as per the game played in 1972 between Klatman and Varna. So we'll get back to the main line. After the 10th move, instead of bishop capturing the d4 knight, white continues with bishop to c4 and then knight plays to f5. White finally gets the long castling done on 12th move, followed by knight capturing the bishop which is there on e3 block. White has a good move here where he can sacrifice its knight by giving a check, coming back to square f6. With this knight to f6, the queen is won at too high a cost, where if it was not captured by the knight, or if it is not been a check by the knight on f6, if queen simply ends up taking the knight on e3, it would have been a normal development event for the white. Because of that, white goes ahead with this variation where he places his knight on f6 and gives a check. Bishop captures the knight and black queen has been getting captured by the white queen on d8 square, and the bishop on c4 has been captured by the knight. And with this capture on c4 square, black has the three minor pieces, but the main thing is that after the queen moves, white loses his b2 pawn and his king comes under tremendous attack. Once the queen gets back to its square on d5 square, bishop gives a threat to queen by getting it placed on e6 square. Now white queen moves to f3 square. Bishop cross b2, check to the king. King moves to b1, the only square. Rook a to c8, and here the white resigns at the 17th move, once the 17th move is done. This is how the black has dominated the white's attack for the e4 line, and it is pretty much covered with all the variations which are part of the Sicilian Dragon variation. Hope this video was of very great information for you all, at least on the Sicilian Dragon variations with the episode 1, 2 and 3. We'll meet up in the next episode with a new topic on the Sicilian variation with the new variation. Until we meet next time, wish you all have a great time ahead. Thanks for watching. Have a great time ahead. Take care. Bye.